Annabelle is moving to Salem, and depending on who you ask, that's either exactly what should happen or something that never should have happened at all. For months, one of the most unusual debates in the paranormal world hasn't been about ghosts, hauntings, demons, or evidence. It's been about a museum, a collection of artifacts, a famous legacy, and who should be trusted to carry it into the future. Because while Annabelle may still be the headline, she isn't really the story. The real story is what happens when a piece of paranormal history becomes bigger than the place where it began. A closed museum, new caretakers, a city with its own complicated relationship with the supernatural, and a debate that has divided locals, historians, paranormal investigators, believers, skeptics, and even members of the paranormal community itself. Because this isn't a story about whether a doll is haunted. It's a story about ownership, preservation, identity, legacy, and what happens when one of the most famous collections in paranormal history gets a second life. Hey everyone, I'm Monique, and welcome back to another Deathly Curious Dispatch. If you've listened to our previous Dispatched episodes, you'll know these are the stories that catch my attention and refuse to let go. The stories that take unexpected turns, the stories that become bigger than the original headline, and the stories that leave people asking very different questions, depending on who you talk to. Today's story does all of those things, because on the surface, it sounds simple. Annabelle is moving to Salem. Case closed. Except, the deeper you go, the more complicated it becomes. What started as a story about one of the world's most famous haunted objects quickly became a story about tourism, community identity, historical preservation, commercialization, and perhaps most importantly, who gets to decide what happens to paranormal history when the people who created it are no longer here to make those decisions themselves. As always, today's episode draws upon publicly available reporting, council decisions, interviews, public statements, and community reactions. Where facts are clear, I'll tell you. Where opinions differ, we'll explore why. Because that's what these Dispatch episodes are all about. Not telling you what to believe, not deciding who's right, but following the story wherever it leads. And trust me, this one leads somewhere unexpected. So, let's head to Salem. If you've spent any time around paranormal television, documentaries, podcasts, books, or horror films, you've probably heard of Annabelle. The real Annabelle isn't the terrifying porcelain doll seen in the movies. She's a Raggedy Ann doll. Soft, simple, the kind of doll you could walk past without giving it a second thought. And yet somehow, she became one of the most recognizable objects in paranormal history. According to the story that made her famous, Annabelle came to the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren after a young nursing student reported a series of strange occurrences involving the doll. Objects allegedly moved, notes reportedly appeared. The doll was said to change position when nobody was watching. Eventually, the Warrens became involved and concluded that the activity wasn't coming from the doll itself, but from a spirit allegedly using the doll as a means of manipulation. Now, whether you believe that explanation or not, Annabelle's story became one of the most famous paranormal cases of the modern era. But what's fascinating is that Annabelle wasn't always famous. For years, she was known mostly within paranormal circles. Then, Hollywood happened. The Conjuring universe changed everything. Millions of people who have never heard of Ed and Lorraine Warren suddenly knew the name Annabelle. The doll became a global horror icon. The films generated hundreds of millions of dollars, and a story that once belonged primarily to paranormal enthusiasts entered mainstream culture. At that point, Annabelle became something more than just a case file. She became folklore. And that's what's important, because folklore has a habit of growing beyond the people who created it, beyond the locations where it began, beyond the original story itself. And that's exactly where this story begins. For decades, Annabelle sat inside the Warren Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. The museum housed hundreds of artifacts collected during Ed and Lorraine Warren's careers. To believers, it was a museum containing some of the world's most infamous paranormal objects. The skeptics, it was a collection of stories, legends, and cultural curiosities. Either way, people wanted to see it, not because everyone believed, but because everyone was curious. Then, in 2019, the museum closed to regular public visitation. The collection remained, the artifacts remained, and Annabelle remained. But the museum itself was no longer operating as a traditional public attraction. For many people, it felt like the end of an era. The Warren Museum became something people talked about, rather than somewhere they could actually visit. And for a while, it seems like that's where the story would end. Except it didn't. In 2025, comedian Matt Rife and YouTuber Elton Castee announced they had purchased the famous Warren property. Almost immediately, questions began pouring in. What would happen to the museum? What would happen to Annabelle? And perhaps most importantly, what would happen to the Warren legacy? Interestingly, reports indicate the collection itself remains connected to the Warren family, with the artifacts being placed into the care of the new operators, rather than simply changing hands outright. That distinction may sound small, but for many people, it's significant. Because stewardship and ownership aren't necessarily the same thing. The new operators have repeatedly described themselves as caretakers rather than collectors. Their stated goal is preservation, to keep the collection together, to protect it, and to introduce it to a new generation. Recent announcements suggest those plans are moving ahead quickly, with a temporary Salem location expected to open before a larger permanent home is eventually established. In many ways, the debate about whether this should happen has already been answered. The more interesting question now is what happens next. So why Salem? If the goal is preserving the Warren legacy, why move one of the most famous paranormal collections in the world away from the place where it became legendary? The answer appears to be accessibility. The original museum faced ongoing challenges. Salem, meanwhile, attracts millions of visitors every year. It has built an international reputation around folklore, mystery, witchcraft, history, and the supernatural. If you're looking for a city already interested in the unexplained, Salem makes a lot of sense. On paper, it's an almost perfect fit, and yet not everyone agrees. Because Salem's story is far more complicated than many people realize. When most people hear the word Salem, they think of witches. But Salem's modern identity has been shaped by decades of discussion about how the city should remember its past. The 1692 witch trials remain one of the most significant events in the city's history. And for some people, preserving that history is Salem's most important responsibility. Others embrace Salem's modern identity as a centre for witchcraft, spirituality, folklore, and paranormal tourism. Many support both, and for years, Salem has balanced those identities: history, remembrance, tourism, spirituality, commerce, education. The arrival of the Warren Museum has dropped directly into the middle of that balancing act. Some local residents have welcomed the proposal, others have not. Concerns have ranged from practical issues such as traffic, visitor numbers, and operating hours. But there have also been deeper concerns. Some critics have questioned whether Salem needs another major paranormal attraction. Others have argued that the Warren brand represents a very different kind of paranormal culture than the one Salem has spent decades cultivating. Because Salem is often associated with witchcraft, spirituality, and historical remembrance, the Warren legacy is more commonly associated with demons, possession, haunted objects, and high-profile investigations. So to some people, those worlds fit together perfectly. To others, they feel fundamentally different. And that's where this debate becomes truly fascinating, because this isn't simply believers versus skeptics. It's often paranormal enthusiasts debating other paranormal enthusiasts. The paranormal community itself appears divided. Some believe moving the collection is exactly what should happen. They argue that keeping the museum accessible allows future generations to experience a significant part of paranormal history. Others disagree. Some believe the collection belongs in Connecticut, that its significance comes from its connection to the Warrens and the location where it originally became famous. Others worry that celebrity involvement changes the nature of the collection, not necessarily for the worse, but changes it nonetheless. And perhaps that's the question sitting at the heart of the entire story. Can something evolve without becoming something different? As discussions continued, city officials found themselves weighing the proposal. Questions were raised, public meetings were held, debates followed. At one point, the future of the project seemed uncertain. Operating hours became a major point of contention. Eventually, compromises were reached. Restrictions were imposed. Approval was granted, and the project was allowed to move forward. But while approval settled the legal question, it doesn't settle the public debate. Because agreement and approval are not the same thing. and the conversation surrounding the museum continues. What fascinates me the most is that this story keeps pulling us towards a much larger question. Who owns paranormal history? When a museum founder passes away, what exactly is being preserved? The building, the artifacts, the stories, the reputation, the brand? Perhaps all of them, or perhaps something else entirely. Museums evolve, history sites evolve, collections evolve, but paranormal collections are different. They're built not only on objects, they're built on belief, on stories, on experiences. And those things can be far more difficult to preserve than a physical artifact sitting behind glass. I also find myself wondering something else. Would Ed and Lorraine Warren have wanted this? The honest answer is that none of us know. Maybe they would have embraced the opportunity to share the collection with a larger audience. Maybe they would have preferred everything remain exactly where it was. Maybe they would have supported a new generation carrying the torch. Or maybe they would have concerns of their own. We'll never know. However, it's a question that keeps resurfacing whenever this story is discussed. And if I'm being completely honest, if I ever found myself in Salem and the museum was open, I would probably visit. Not because I expect a doll to move across a room, not because I'm looking to prove anything, but because Annabelle has become part of paranormal history. Whether you believe the stories or not, her influence on paranormal culture is undeniable. The same can be said for the Warren Museum itself. Curiosity is a powerful thing. It's why people visit haunted locations. It's why people listen to podcasts like this one. It's why stories endure. And perhaps that's why this debate has become so passionate, because people care. As things currently stand, Annabelle's move to Salem is no longer simply a proposal. Major hurdles have been cleared, plans have been announced, and barring another unexpected twist, one of the world's most famous haunted objects will soon have a new home. But what fascinates me most is that we've reached a point where Annabelle may have become bigger than the case that created her. Bigger than the museum where she spent decades. Bigger perhaps than the Warrens themselves. Because whether you believe in haunted objects or not, Annabelle has become part of modern folklore. And folklore has a strange way of outgrowing the places where it begins. Perhaps that's the real story here. Not whether Annabelle should move, not whether she's haunted, but what happens when a paranormal legend becomes so large that nobody can quite agree who should be responsible for preserving it. This has been a Deathly Curious Dispatch, the stories that refuse to stay buried. Until next time, stay curious, because sometimes the biggest mystery isn't what happened in the past, it's who gets to tell the story next. Bye.